Tucker Carlson, trying to mainstream as much as he can. As much, sort of like, I don't know, what would you call it? White nationalism, racism.
Stormfront talking points.
Yeah, exactly. And here he is. And, the best way to do this sometimes is just take it head on. What's so bad about this term that, white supremacists use all the time on in promoting their values?
I'm laughing because this is one of about 10 stories that I know you've covered where the government shows preference to people who have shown absolute contempt for our customs, our laws, our system itself, and they're being treated better than American citizens. Now, I know that the left and all the little gatekeepers on Twitter become literally hysterical if you use the term replacement, if you suggest that the Democratic Party is trying to replace the current electorate, the voters now casting ballots.
Okay, let's just take this, one at a time. The gatekeepers on Twitter. Like, what gate is this guy who has a primetime show on the highest rated news channel? What gate is he being kept out of? What area is he being kept out of? None, right? I mean, so you start with this notion of like, I'm oppressed. These views are oppressed in some way. Because they're apparently, according to him, they should not be subject to criticism. And this is like a special treatment that immigrants get, which is probably like, well, obviously you don't have a U.S. driver's license or you don't have a U.S. passport because you're not from the United States. So you wouldn't have that ID. Incidentally, when you go to a country that's not the United States and you have a U.S. passport, they okay that too. Go ahead.
The Democratic Party is trying to replace the current electorate, the voters now casting ballots, with new people, more obedient voters from the third world. But they become hysterical because that's what's happening, actually. Let's just say it, that's true. If this was happening in your house, if you were in 6th grade, for example, and without telling you, your parents adopted a bunch of new siblings and gave them brand new bikes and let them stay up later and help them with their homework and gave them twice the allowance that they gave you, you would say to your siblings, I think we're being replaced by kids that our parents love more. And it would be kind of hard to argue against you because look at the evidence. So this matters on a bunch of different levels, but on the most basic level, it's a voting rights question. In a democracy, one person equals one vote. If you change the population, you dilute the political power of the people who live there. So every time they import a new voter, I become disenfranchised as a current voter. So I don't understand why we don't understand this. I mean, everyone wants to make a racial issue out of it. Ooh, the white replacement theory. No. This is a voting rights question. I have less political power because they're importing a brand new electorate. Why should I sit back and take that? The power that I have as an American guaranteed at birth is one man, one vote, and they're diluting it. No, they're not allowed to do that. Why are we putting up with this?
So wait a second. First off, he talks about third world countries, right? So it's a specific problem he has with immigrants. And that somehow in his weird, my parents never loved me, my mom rejected me analogy here that he's using, which my understanding is the case. He is saying that somehow immigrants are getting things that American citizens aren't getting. And then he goes on to the idea that somehow his vote is being diluted by the presence of immigrants. Well, his vote, incidentally, also gets diluted whenever somebody turns 18 in this country. His vote gets diluted when anybody actually makes votes and they vote for the first time. His vote gets diluted.
Or moves to a state. If you move to a state, you're undiluting certain votes and diluting others.
Yes, this dilution of votes. But even just the term like dilution is also sort of interesting, right?
Well, he says one man, one vote, which this does nothing to change.
Right. One man, one vote still happens Everybody who comes in gets one vote. And the idea that in this country, we haven't always had this dynamic since the moment we became a country where immigrants came in and diluted the vote. There's never been a time in this country where that hasn't happened. It's bizarre. And here's the thing. Your vote can suffer dilution in some way, I guess, if more people are born. I mean, I imagine your vote was worth much more when we had a population that was 1/3 the size it is now. Maybe we shouldn't allow people to have children. But there has not been a moment in the existence of this country where that didn't happen. And you're not being replaced.
Yeah, you're still here.
Like, what is the replacement that's taking place? This is just him laundering a white supremacist extremist, frankly, a slogan. That's all he's doing.
Not for the first time with Mark Stein there too. He was on a couple years ago and they were talking about the Camp of the Saints, like a 1970s book that Nazis are big fans of, about basically hordes coming and taking over Europe.
And the irony is that Mark Stein, who works in this country, writes for American publications, has a radio show in America, is Canadian. He's literally replacing people.
Send him back.
He's literally taking an American's job. And he's not even a citizen. I mean, it's really getting just super naked now.
Remember when Tucker fired the Nazi on his staff?
Yeah, I do remember when he felt bad for that kid. I mean, that guy was, and I would imagine, I wonder where that guy's working now. I bet you he doesn't necessarily, he's not getting paid by Fox, but I bet you he's still doing some work for Tucker, would be my guess. I mean, it's just, I don't know how you ignore that. And yeah, I'm looking at Greenwald and whoever else goes on that show. I mean, it's pretty obvious what's going on there. And Tucker, of course, also getting involved in the hysteria around the transgender agenda is taking over. I mean, it was not that long ago, 20 years ago, when they were talking about the gay agenda taking over America. And they just moved on. Not that there's been enough progress in Americans' perspective on gay people that it no longer has political salience. They've moved on to the next target, marginalized people. Here's Tucker Carlson with Wilfred Riley. Who is Wilfred Riley?
He is a political scientist from Southern Illinois University, and he does a lot of contrarian sort of research.
And this is Tucker Carlson is it on Fox Nation? Is this not?
This is his daytime show that he's launched on Fox Nation.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
The percentage of people that identified as transgender traditionally was about 0.01%, which would be 1 in 10,000 or so. It's now 2% or a little more, which is 1 person in 50. And there are responses when social scientists more on that quantitative side say this. I mean, one is sort of simply, well, doesn't it make sense that as we get more tolerant, this would happen? But I mean, the short answer is that you don't see increases of that size in any other arena. You haven't seen the number of gay people increase to 90% or whatever, from a little under 10%, what Kinsey said it was, anything roughly equivalent. We all get along rather well in the USA, but you haven't seen the number of interracial marriages skyrocket from 5 or 10% at the start of the modern era to almost all today. You generally don't see 20,000% increases.
In anything.
In anything, ever. In fact, it's generally not possible. The increases that I just gave would have been on the order of perhaps 500%. But here you've seen a phenomenon go from something that was treated essentially just as a medical issue. It was very concentrated among young males. It was very concentrated among males who had identified as women, using that gender-sex distinction their entire life. You've seen that go from this to, again, not too far under 5% of all kids concentrated among girls. So these questions are very tough to discuss, but they're serious questions. I mean, is society self-sustaining to some extent? If 30% of men simply aren't willing or able to sleep with women, if another 2 or 3% of, in particular, young women want to modify their bodies so they cannot, in many or most cases, have children, I mean, that's something that's an issue almost at the structural level. And you might ask, why is that going on? It's something that at very least needs research.
It's a challenge to the perpetuation of the species, is what you're saying. And I
if
can
both trends increased, yes.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to think of anything more profound than that.
I don't know what to start except for to say during the day, Tucker's worried about a challenge to the species. And at night, he's worried about the dilution of his vote by the introduction of more people into the country. He's got it covered on both ends. The idea, like any, I mean, I don't even know how to. I mean, the idea that an increase in self-identification of transgender people from 0.01% of the population to 2% of the population represents a threat to the sustainability of the species, of the human race, is, I mean, how does someone even like articulate this stuff and know that other people are watching? It's just amazing to me.
Yeah, I hate his little isms like, oh, it's about as profound as anything you can think about. Like,
it is just unbelievable. His Tucker Carlson's ability to he's an actor who just has one crutch, but he can hold a straight face throughout all of this. That's his most impressive, I think, technique. I'm going to let bat crap bullshit be articulated in front of me, and I'm just going to pretend like it actually makes sense and is a really alarming thing that the people watching this should be concerned about. It's just absurd. I mean, and they jumped from the did you notice that the professor jumped from self-identification when he's talking about transgender people to the McKinsey estimate of who was gay to self-identification, right? Like, if you looked at who identified as gay 50 years ago, you would see, I'm convinced, as much, if not a greater increase between then and today, based upon the fact that you're less likely to be beat up or abused or killed because you're self-identifying as gay.
And the assumption the point that he's trying to like fearmonger about is what? That there's going to be this exponential growth in trans people to the point where there will be no more procreation in the world.
Right.
I mean, come on.
Of course, because you've gone from 0.01% to 2% in whatever amount of time, let's say it's 5 years. Well, you could just do the math. In less than 20 years, everyone's going to be transgender.
This is exactly the same hysterical use of trends that you saw like 10 years so years ago from people who were really concerned about Muslims taking over Europe.
Right.
I mean, it's just, this is just, it's the idea.
And I'll just say, like, if in like 100 years there's like a 75% of people are trans, it'll say something to me about gender and how artificial it was and how amazing it was constructed and maintained.
Exactly. I mean, give me a break. And it's not just about Tucker Carlson. I'm sorry. If you're going to be a critic of integrity in the media and be supportive of this guy, guess what it says about your critique of integrity in the media? Yes, I'm talking about Glenn Greenwald.